In today's episode, we'll be going through nerve questions. How I'm going to approach this is that I'm going to show you from start to finish how I'm thinking, approaching, and writing my answer in order to maximize my marks and comparing to the mark scheme. So let us begin. This is a very interesting question because it is a 6-marker. So, number one exam technique is that I'm going to read the question first. It says describe the differences between the two action potentials, right? And suggest explanations for the differences you've described. So there's no point thinking about similarities, just think about differences, okay? So right. I can see that there are two graphs. You see, if you've watched one of my command word videos. I'm not sure which one it was, but I went through the circulatory systems of like fish versus mammal, and in that one I essentially laid out like a table format, talking about differences like fish, mammals. But for this one, I'm not gonna set that out because sometimes you can just talk about one thing. Like I can just talk about this one and use like comparative wording opposed to me writing two separate like paragraphs of differences that they both have. What's the point of that when I can just write about like dopamine neurons saying, oh yeah, well it has less of this, it has more of that, there is no this. Like it's all about making it more efficient and easier for the examiner to read and understand what you're trying to say. That's how you're gonna get more marks. So that's me thinking about the layout of how I'm going to structure my answer. But now I'm going to actually look at the figure properly and see what the differences are in the first place. So I'm going to take this as my baseline, mainly because I just feel like the dopamine one would be the easiest to use the comparative wording for. So when looking at the two graphs, clearly I can see that there are two peaks. This only has one peak. What else can I see? What else can I see? I'm going to look at the y-axis, and I can see that the peak is around here, whereas the peak is around there. That's one difference. Another thing is about the threshold potential. Threshold potential is different. I can't see any like refractory period in the dopamine neuron, whereas I can see it in the Purkinje neuron. What else can I see? Oh, the length of the action potential. Not only is the action potential on the dopamine neuron um, like lower, like the peak's lower, as I said, because of the numbers identified here, they are also, I feel like they take more time, whereas this one's quite rapid, and that's how it's fitted in like two peaks. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking in terms of like differences. In terms of explanations, these are like just memorize them, okay? These are always the things you talk about in like nerve questions. You talk about like the gradients, right? So you talk about the steepness of I don't know, sodium ion gradient, potassium ion gradient. You talk about the number of potassium ion channels, number of sodium ion channels. You always talk about the number of the sodium potassium pump in the neuron membrane. You always mention about there being like more voltage gated or less voltage gated sodium ion channels and potassium ion channels. Like there's all these things that you just chuck in. Like you just do it. This topic is so great for just memorizing the content and just writing it down because they are going to be the answers. There's nothing else that could be the answer because that's all we have learnt in the specification. So let's write that down and I'll show you how I'm going to structure it. Oh, one other thing. This and is bold, right? It's bold. If you just write about the differences, just describing them, without giving an explanation, then you're not gonna get like into a level 3 answer. You're gonna be like capped at your marks because you must mention both the differences and the explanations. So don't just do one or the other, you must do both. Okay, that's my answer, and that's how I structured it. Remember, comparative wording is so vital, so notice this. Longer, it's like less positive, less negative, different number, different number, different number, steeper. Oh my god. Steeper, okay? Remember, comparative wording is vital for differences because we didn't write both the picking Purkinje neuron and the dopamine neuron in the answer. Like, we didn't write both of them. We only said in relation to the dopamine neuron. And that is why you need to like use comparative wording. Because it's like, if you said, oh yeah, actual potential duration is longer, right? That refers to both those figures. Actually, you can't even answer if you don't use comparative wording. So what are you comparing it to? How can you say it's longer if you're not looking at something else, right? So that's very important, and that does check the answer. Okay, let's see. See, this is what they did. They only picked one and used comparative wording because it's just so simple to do that. It talks about like less polarization, polarized. Okay, so oh no, I did say that because I said it has a less negative resting potential, I think. What did I not say? Repolarization is slower. That was pretty obvious. I should have said that. But now I'm going to write that in my notes and I'm going to ensure that I write that next time. For the explanations, let's see. Mm, I think I've basically got all of that. Maybe not this one, I don't know. But again, I write that in my notes and just notice how simple the mark scheme looks, right? They don't want like long paragraphs, just to give it like bullet point formed. Just make it simple for the examiner. And remember, you must memorize the content. Memorize and understand because there's like you can't have exam technique without the content and content without the exam technique. Like they are together. You can't separate them apart. So yeah. Um Remember, the two most important exam techniques are read the question first and state all the obvious points. Just like you can see here. We basically like said like what we saw but made it in terms of like nerve terminology. Yeah, like do some questions and let me know how it goes.